Ukraine is striking hard and moving quickly. During a week shaped by strong counterattack actions, Ukraine has just made Russia's soldiers pull back on 2 battle areas through 2 large attacks. This is deeply embarrassing for Russia. Its fighters are moving around without direction as they face Ukrainian strikes unlike anything they have experienced before. For Ukraine, it is using these counterattacks to ruin Russia's war plans for the year 2026. Ukraine's attack from 2 directions happened on the Dnipro River area and the Oleksandrivsk area, and both have made Russia pull back in a rush that will create serious problems for its 2026 battle strategy. We will explain what occurred in Oleksandrivsk and why it is important later in this report. First, let us go to the Dnipro River and several pieces of land that Russia believed it had firmly controlled. For many months, Russia has kept positions on the small islands inside the Dnipro River. Putin's fighters thought they were safe from any Ukrainian counterattack. After all, they were on islands. For Ukraine to begin an attack, it would need to try to send soldiers by boat onto those islands, leaving its troops open to counterstrikes by Russian drones and other weapons. Russia understood this very well, because it had spent a big part of 2025 sending soldiers on hopeless missions to capture these exact islands. Russia had succeeded at very high cost, and Putin thought that Ukraine would not risk answering with its own attacks for fear of losing important soldiers settled on these islands. Russian forces had been starting drone attacks against Ukraine's fighters and regular people across the riverbanks of the Dnipro River. The islands had become a group of starting points, letting Russia attack Ukraine's higher positions on the riverbanks and begin strikes against the city of Dnipro, which is another of Russia's main targets. Ukraine understood that it could not let these attacks continue. However, it also could not directly attack the Dnipro River islands. So, as Russia enjoyed its supposed victory and continued its plan of frightening Ukraine's civilians, Ukrainian military leaders created a plan. If sending soldiers to the islands was impossible, then they needed to think of something different, something smarter. And what they developed was a 3-step plan that slowly made Russia's island forces weaker, causing them to completely fall apart in one of the most clever counterattacks we have seen during the Ukraine war until now. Ukraine Today wrote about all 3 steps in a February 17 article connected to RFU News. Step 1. Avoided the Dnipro River and its islands completely. Ukraine correctly saw that the separated Russian troops on those islands would need supplies if they were to have any chance to stay alive. Military leaders also saw that much of the air pressure being kept on Dnipro itself was coming, because Russia had built command centers and storage areas along the Dnipro River front, which needed to be destroyed. With this understanding, Ukraine added a deadly amount of venom to the Russian front lines. Drone pilots from Ukraine's Venom group began doing strikes against Russian places that were being used by Russia's drone pilots as storage and launch spots. These were not normal drone strikes. Ukraine used specially changed drones that carried powerful TM-62 mines, which were given stabilizing fins that let them be dropped from the drones so they could fly over to their targets. Think of it like the glide bomb method, but smaller. The method worked very well. Ukraine has been using TM-62s for many different purposes over the last few months. In January, Forbes wrote that the mines have become something of a weapon for all situations, made during the Soviet time and holding 7.5 kilograms, or about 16.5 pounds of strong explosives. TM-62s are the most commonly used anti-tank mines across the world, and that is how Russia expected Ukraine to use them, to make mine areas meant to slow down Russia's tanks. But what Ukraine has done is create an updated version of the TM-62, called the TM-2025, which is made using 3D printers and holds both electric, mechanical, and extra fuses, which allow for setting off from far away. And that brings us back to the Step 1 part of Ukraine's Dnipro River plan. The Venom group sent TM-62s Russia's way by air, probably taking advantage of the faraway setting-off abilities of the improved versions that Ukraine uses to cause great damage. Russia's storage places and command buildings were made weaker during these explosive strikes, which served the important purpose of hurting Russia's ability to do drone watching or to strike back against Ukraine's forces. Russia's Dnipro River Island forces became more exposed than ever before. But Ukraine did not rush in. Instead, it started Step 2. This time, Ukraine's FPV drone pilots turned their attention to the boat crossings and supply paths that Russia had created in the Dnipro River. We mentioned earlier that cutting off supplies to the island forces would be a disaster for Putin's troops. That is what Step 2 of Ukraine's smart counterattack plan was all about. with the paths under steady attack. Russia could no longer take wounded soldiers away from the island. They would be left to die and rot among their friends. Ukraine's drones destroyed enemy motorboats as they came near the islands, cutting off the soldiers on those separated pieces of land from the basics, such as food and water, that they needed to stay alive. Russia was reduced to trying to use drones to carry supplies to its soldiers, but step one of Ukraine's smart plan had made that almost impossible. At this point, Russia's Dnipro River island soldiers were becoming desperate. Some were even trying to escape, desperately using tall grass as cover, only to get shot apart by Ukraine's drones. As all of this was happening, Ukraine was also targeting command and watching posts in the taken areas of Oleksandrivsk. This part of the plan was months in preparation. Even before Russia took the Dnipro River islands, Ukraine had destroyed the Oleksandrivsk bridge to an AAS and hammer strike started by one of its MiG-29 planes. Similar strikes also destroyed command and watching posts. This part of the step removed more of Russia's eyes and ears over the Dnipro River forces and created confusion across the chain of command. If the island forces were exposed after step one, they were frightened, alone, and starving after step two. Then came step three of Ukraine's counterattack. With Russia's forces separated, Ukraine focused on slowly making their already messy defenses weaker through steady and building strikes against the forces themselves. Those Russian soldiers had no drone protection. Step one took care of that. They also were not getting orders or warnings from leaders because of step two. All they could do was run around without direction, hoping in vain that Ukraine's drones and weapons would not find them. Hiding places were destroyed. The few supply spots that the soldiers had been using to get drone supply drops were taken out. Whenever Russia's island soldiers were unwise enough to gather together, a Ukrainian strike would not be far behind. Little by little, FPV drone attacks and airstrikes slowly reduced defensive buildings, leading to the Dnipro River forces facing a choice: die on the islands or leave quickly. Many have already been smart enough to do the second option, just like the forces in Oleksandrivsk that we will discuss in just a few minutes. Using secret information, Ukrainian military spokesperson Vladislav Voloshin says that Russia has already pulled its forces away from some of the Dnipro River islands as Ukraine's three-step plan took its effect on their spirit and mental state. Nobody can blame those soldiers. They did exactly what Ukraine expected them to do after the counterattack took away their supplies and left them to a fate of being bombed out of existence if they did not run. Now, RFU News says Russia's top leaders believe that taking the Dnipro Islands is a useless effort. Russia does not have the resources it needs to support the troops on those islands, and that means that Russia's starting points for drone attacks on Dnipro and the nearby regions have disappeared. Do not underestimate how big this is for Ukraine. From a military view, it obviously means that Ukraine's forces along the riverbanks of the Dnipro River can work more freely. They may not choose to fully take back the Dnipro River islands. That remains to be seen. But leaving those islands empty removes a major attack path for Russia, which reduces large amounts of pressure on Ukrainian forces that are actively building stronger defenses in preparation for the rest of 2026. But the effect of this counterattack may be felt more clearly among regular people. Russia has been involved in a plan of frightening Ukraine's non-fighters ever since Putin began his attack. In October, Reuters wrote that Russian drone pilots were even purposely chasing Ukrainian civilians with their flying machines in a twisted sort of human hunt meant to make it impossible for anybody to live anything close to a normal life in Ukraine. Russia increased its terror actions in 2025, leading to civilian deaths rising by 26% compared to 2024. According to Action on Armed Violence, 2,248 civilians were reported killed by Russia during the year, with another 12,493 being hurt by Russia's drone attacks on cities. The chances are higher that some of those deaths happened in Dnipro. With the Dnipro River islands cleared, people in the nearby areas can breathe a little easier. Now, if the first of the counterattacks that we covered was about reducing pressure, the second was all about getting ready for a summer that Russia plans to make very difficult for Ukraine. But before we go deeper into that, this is the military show, and we give the complete picture, not just the main news points. Make sure you are subscribed so you stay ahead of what is happening. Let us move on to Oleksandrivsk and what is happening to Russia on that front. On February 17, Militarny wrote about comments made by the Ukrainian military's top leader, Oleksandrivsk, who said that Ukraine was still in the middle of starting counterattacks in the Oleksandrivsk area near the important city of Humilia. Ukraine's air attack forces and regular attack forces are actively involved in actions in this area, which seems to mean that they are pushing through the unclear areas being entered by small groups of Russian soldiers to clear those intruders out. Our groups carry out strong counterattack, attack actions, effectively use unmanned systems, big guns, radio-electronic battle equipment, Syrskyi reported during a visit to the battle lines. Ukraine's top leader also stated that freeing the lands that Ukraine is currently aiming for is a main goal, but its forces must do so carefully to save the lives of as many of its soldiers as possible. That may be the main point with Ukraine's second attack. For many, the taking back of land in Oleksandrivsk seems like it could be preparing for a much bigger counterattack, perhaps even a full push into Humilia. That is not the situation, as you are going to find out in a few minutes. Rather, and much like the three-step plan that Ukraine used in the Dnipro River, Ukraine is slowly removing Russian occupiers to take back important pieces of land that it is going to use for a very important reason as we move toward the middle of 2026. So, what did the Oleksandrivsk action achieve? The short answer: important wins for Ukraine that will become very important very soon. Militarny points this out with a group of maps that show that Ukraine has made local wins across several parts of the front lines between February 9th and February 16. In the Oleksandrivsk and Humilia areas, the Russian front has been pushed back greatly, letting Ukraine free several villages, along with clearing land outside of those villages that will serve the purpose that we are going to show soon. According to the Telegraph, this Oleksandrivsk push has been done together with a bigger push in the Zaporizhia area, causing Ukraine to take back the largest amount of land that it has managed to free since its ultimately unsuccessful large counterattack against Moscow's invading forces back in the summer of 2023. Altogether, the outlet says, Ukraine has managed to take 78 square miles, or a little over 200 square kilometers, of land back from Russia in 5 days. To add pain to what is already a deep wound for Russia, the outlet adds that this amount of land is about equal to what Russia has managed to take during the entire month of December 2025. What we see here is Ukraine taking advantage of something that happened to Russia earlier in February: the loss of Starlink. We have made the headless chickens joke a few times already in this video, but it absolutely fits what is happening to Russia's soldiers in Oleksandrivsk. After SpaceX's choice to shut down the illegal Starlink devices that Russia was using for everything from its long-distance drone strikes to communication on the front lines, Russia's forces have been lost without command. Up to 90% of the country's groups are believed to have lost connection to a network that they badly needed to help them organize their attacks on Ukraine's defenses. Naturally, those attacks have mostly stopped. Those that are still happening are messy and unorganized. And, as Russia's soldiers are increasingly separated from top command by the loss of their communication abilities, Ukraine has been taking advantage in places like Oleksandrivsk and Zaporizhia. Also somewhat not widely reported is the fact that this latest group of counterattacks builds on something that Ukraine had been doing toward the end of 2025. In December, Interfax wrote that Ukraine had managed to take back land in the villages of Udashny, Rishina, and Kotline, all of which lie west of the troubled city of Pokrovsk. These were smaller wins than the ones we are seeing now. But it is clear that Ukraine is going on the attack against Russia. Again, a smart Ukrainian plan is behind all of this. Though sped up by Russia's loss of Starlink, Ukraine has long been placing its big guns, supplies, drone pilots, and most of its forces between 6 and 12 miles, or 9.65 to 19.3 kilometers, behind Russia's positions. This has allowed for the creation of a large, unclear area that is filled with Ukrainian drones and has been a deadly place for Russia's soldiers. What we are seeing in Oleksandrivsk now is the result of that unclear area plan. With Russia's entering forces made weaker, Ukraine's air and ground attack groups are able to move forward and take back land on which Russia had only the weakest of holds in the first place. Russia's still trying to push into the areas where Ukraine is now taking back land. But according to Syrskyi, its forces are having almost no success at all. The enemy is not giving up his plans to break through our battle groups, and is doing constant attacks, including with the use of weapons, but without important success. Syrskyi said in a Telegram message that matches his Facebook statement. Ukraine's top leader added, "The soldiers of the defense forces are holding the set lines and positions, stopping the enemy's plans and causing heavy losses on him in people and equipment. And it is Russia's tries to keep its attacks going in Oleksandrivsk and other places that show the real reason for the second of Ukraine's counterattacks. This is a case of Ukraine using everything that it has to take land now so that it is ready for what is coming, making the most while conditions are good, so to speak, though it is perhaps more correctly a case of clearing out the Russian occupiers while they freeze in their unclear area hiding spots. The reason that Ukraine wants to turn the unclear areas into freed land is that it is getting ready for a summer when Russia is believed to be planning to restart its push against Ukraine. According to a February 9 article in the Kyiv Post, Russia has spent the last few months gathering important backup forces for what it plans to be a large attack on Ukraine's eastern and possibly southern areas during the late spring and into the summer. If you are getting memories of Russia's failed 2025 summer attack, which failed to take Pokrovsk or create the safety areas in northeastern Ukraine that Putin wanted, then you are exactly right. This time around, Russia plans to push toward the cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk in the Donetsk area, the Kyiv Post writes, with the final goal of forcing Ukraine's ground forces into a large battle that will let Russia destroy them. Ukraine would be unwise to fight the kind of battle that Putin wants. The new summer attack seems designed to force the kind of old-style war that Russia likes, which is also a war that would see Ukraine give up its uneven approach in favor of a direct fight. Of course, Ukraine is not going to do that, and that is why it is taking as much land as it can now. Every inch of that land is now going to be filled with the kinds of defenses and strong points that Ukraine has already been using to tear up Russian soldiers in places like Pokrovsk. So, think of what Ukraine has just done in Oleksandrivsk as the pushing back of the Russian lines, so it can turn what were once unclear areas into even more deadly killing areas. The head of the summer attack, to which Russia is supposedly going to give 100,000 troops, Ukraine has put Russia into a position where it will have to fight to take back what it likely wanted to use as starting points. This is very smart. Why? Think back to what we said about Russia building up its important backup forces for the summer. If Russia now has to take back land that Ukraine has freed, it will have to send more soldiers into Ukraine's killing areas. Those soldiers will be torn apart, forcing the use of backup forces that Putin wanted to keep for the summer. The more of those backup forces that Ukraine can destroy in places like Oleksandrivsk and other places, the weaker the summer attack becomes. And that is how Ukraine will force Putin into a repeat of the summer of 2025. Russia will be left with big plans and even bigger claims that lie in pieces. And it is all because of Ukraine carrying out a group of exact and smart counterattacks where it has given up very little in return for huge wins. As the Atlantic Council noted in January, the defenses that Ukraine already has are making Russia pay huge prices, both in money and in the blood of its soldiers, to make small wins. With those wins being undone by Ukraine in Oleksandrivsk, Russia will have to pay those heavy prices all over again before it can even think of moving forward in the summer. Russia does not have what it needs to pay those prices, and it has long ago used up all its chances. After 4 years of fighting, the Ukraine war is finished for Putin. He is just too unaware to know it. His foolish plans have led his army to suffer the biggest soldier losses in modern history, and it is only going to get worse for Russia from here. Find out how by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more study of Ukraine's battlefield movements and the effect that they have on Russia.
Camino, mi camino, mi camino, mi camino, mi camino.